Yo, good morning, good evening, and good night. This is, or good afternoon and good evening. I guess is how that would go. We're going to split those three up. This is Aaron Kessler here with the Expanded Understanding, and Zach will be joining us shortly as well. Welcome to the show, and everyone in the chat. Hello, everyone. And let's see, Sam's the last one to comment there said, "Hey, beautiful peeps, someone tell me to go to sleep." Sam, go to sleep. And she says that because she's in the UK. So that is one of the people who good morning to, because that is what's 4:30 in the morning where you're at. So kudos to you for either still being up or being up really early to and tuning into the show. So you and Angela and Andrew, and I think there's a couple other people out there that are yeah, and Kevin just chimed in too. Go to sleep. So let's see. Welcome to the show. It is Wednesday. How is everyone doing? Everyone in the chat, feel free to chime in with any interesting anecdotes or stories, or let's see. Maybe we can make it a thing at the beginning of shows, being open. I mean, really, anytime during any show, but being like an open sharing time to be able to share random stories, funny stories, different dynamics to bring to the conversation. And see, I'm working also with the overlays here. Where is, oh, there's that one. And that one, there we go. That'll work for the time being. So let's see. So Wednesday today, we've got Mary wins comment. Hi everyone, you beautiful ones. Hi Mary, nice to have you here and interaction with us. So today, Wednesday, what did I do today? I had work today, and I got a decent nap in, which was nice because I was very tired today. um, so yeah, so it was good. It's been in Seattle here. It's been smoky. Like it started yesterday or 2 days ago. Just kind of the smoky haze, and you could smell it first thing in the morning coming out to just coming out of my building here and out to the vehicle. And you could smell like the fire smoke in the air, and so that's been interesting. It hasn't been ashy. I've heard it's been ashy in certain places, and so it hasn't been ashy. It's just been smoky and just has a nice like this haze. I think I posted some pictures on my Facebook from it, and it's interesting. It's caused them like the moon was really cool the other night. The moon was this really intense orange color because of the smoke, so that was cool. And um, the weather has been today was warm, was really warm, but it's gotten like weirdly cold. It kind of dropped in temperature the last 2 days and kind of had this weird cold burst streak that happened. So let's see. Mary said there were ashes all over here, 20 miles south of LA. Really interesting. So Zach is an hour what east of LA, something like that in that area. I wonder if they're getting ash down there. Jen, if you're listening, I wonder if you guys are getting ash, like an ash buildup, because that's crazy. I wonder how the skies are in that area. I remember, was it well, it was probably 3 years ago, something like that, 2 or 3 years ago, when the fires were really bad up here or up in Canada, I think, and they came over and the smoke came over like this in Seattle, and maybe worse, was really intense. Um, so yeah, my heart and our prayers and thoughts, I guess, go out to just people that are struggling and run to people that I know, friends that are being evacuated from their homes and are actually going through. This is it's not just something you're hearing about in the news or it's a little hazy in Seattle. This is actually affecting their life and well being, and that's a really intense thing just to have your home being chased down by a fire, if you will. Well, I guess your home's not going anywhere. It's not really being chased. It's just being consumed potentially. These fires that are just moving through, and then you have to evacuate and take what, a carload of things or whatever you can get out in that time or in that moment, and you know. So I don't think it's a situation anybody like goes out of their way to try to put themselves in. It's something you may find yourself in, then learning how to respond to that. So we'll see. Um, Things come out for different people in different places, and let us know if you guys are doing well or if you're in a place that we can send you some extra energy or awareness or attention or things that we can do to help or bring awareness in those dynamics. So especially part of our expanded family and just the um, participating in the group and the chat. And if you're here listening, we're happy to have you. So expanding understanding, expanding thoughts. Let's see if there's anything people are throwing up in the chat. It's good to see everybody too. Kevin and Jen and Jacob and Studio and Willow and Chris and let's see, um, and Patty and anyone else who comes in and may come in. And yeah, good to see you. So, um, what's a random subject here to dive into tonight or in this moment for expanded understanding? One, I'll have to figure out why my camera seems a little blurry because that's kind of annoying. I'll have to expand my understanding on fixing that equipment another time. Um, hmm. What's coming to mind? I guess okay. It's like the thought of connection and connection with people and connection through conversation or through interactions. And I guess like what? Okay, just these are just random thoughts I'm having right now. Feel free to chime in the chat and we can have a digital interaction or conversation. Or actually, if you're interested in coming on or chatting about things, feel free also to reach out to me on Messenger or in chat, and we can chat about, or you can come on the show and we can chat and dive into the conversation with Zach and I. Let's see. Kevin said, "Good crossing frequencies with you as well, brother. Nailed it." Yeah. So let's see. I don't know. Connecting with people and ways people experience connection. I think it's really cool the dynamic that we live in nowadays with the diversity of culture and the access to diversity of culture through the internet. Primarily, I was going to say and other means, but no, it's really mainly the internet. There are community outreaches, and there are really cool apps like oh shoot, what's it called? I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's a community like engagement app. So based on subject matter, things you're interested in, all sorts of categories and things. I mean, anywhere from like group activities, yoga, and different things to people interested, just like in talking about science or quantum physics or biology. That they actually have. Oh, it's Meetup. I think the app's called Meetup, and they have places all over your area wherever you live of people that are interacting and meeting up just to chat or connect and um, talk about things that nuanced things that you may find really interesting that I mean, other than the internet or being really good at manifesting, being able to like meditate or whatever and manifest the people into your life, that can be really hard to come by. And so finding connection with people based on shared common interest, and then so the part of connection I'm thinking of though is the dynamic that happens, I guess, through conversation and connecting with someone, and it's really interesting. I guess nice. It never ceases to. Is surprise the right word? It's probably not surprise because I feel like um, I've had these types of realities manifest enough times that it's understanding that this is like okay, this is a part of life. This kind of happens. You eventually run into people, or consistently seem to run into people over time. Whatever those periods are in between, but running into people where like you're intrigued by how intrigued you are with that person or what they said or some kind of interaction, and being able to interact with someone on a subject matter, maybe it's a topic of interest, or I don't know, something like Dragon Ball Z or something back here or whatever, some other dynamic. And there's just like a nuanced way that that person either perceives those things or articulates certain ideas or concepts or things you may already know, but there's this nuanced additional perception or layer of interaction that they bring to a dialogue or a conversation. And then that in turn like sparks some reaction inside of you that you may have thought of otherwise, or that you are excited to respond. There's actual engagement of um I guess you could call this, I guess this be categorized as the beginnings of some form of sapiosexy or sapio attracted dynamic. So some attracted to some level of conversation or cognitive interaction that you have with another person, and whatever that means to you. So it doesn't necessarily mean like smart talk, but I mean it is to you smart. Let's say smart talk about a subject matter, Dragon Ball Z, or like Star Trek or whatever, whatever, some kind of subject matter that you are into or mutually into. um or it's something more generic like actual or more practical and everyday life stuff, whatever it is, man, whatever your shared interests are. So I guess I am grateful to the realities, seemingly to non-random realities, synchronistic realities, or consistent repeating realities of the universe to bring people along in life that that unexpected to, I guess, my little self, or finding, what I was going to find in life for a person. It's like, wow, it's really cool that I met, this person, or people that are so intrigued or able to engage with in a new and even effortless way, or way that incites being encouraged just in that interaction, by interacting with that person, because of these new and nuanced perspectives that thread in and cause awesome and coherent conversation. And on that note, we'll thread in Zach Mortimer and say, hello, Zach. Welcome to the conversation.
Yo, what up? How is it going?
Yo, it's going all right. And how are you doing?
And just off there, fixed. I woke up like 5 minutes before I turned this stream on, so I've been like waking up really lights, too much lights, less lights. Yeah,
Yeah. Is it a good sleep, or is it a hot sleep because it's crazy hot there and it was like this sweaty, uncomfortable hot sleep?
I think I've been a nocturnal being a lot of my life, and especially when, well, nocturnal beings exist because of fucking heat, really, and
Yeah.
so whenever I end up in places where it is really hot, I kind of start erring towards that nocturnal behavior.
Hmm.
Again, I fucking don't like the middle of the day when it's 105 degrees
Yeah. No
or
shit.
whatever. Like no one likes that. I think everybody would, if they can avoid it, wouldn't be engaging with that. I mean, why? Like if it's hotter than 98.6, your body doesn't want it. If it's
Mm.
colder than 98.6, technically in a way your body also doesn't want it. That's why it auto regulates at 98.6. You know?
Mm.
And like, yeah, I don't know. So you definitely don't want to be fucking like doing workout and shit. You know, like I've fucking like sheeted houses and dug holes and moved rocks and chopped wood and shit in like 110 degrees. It's not fucking pleasant. I know from
Nope.
personal experience. I wouldn't recommend doing it if you can find any way to avoid it. For instance, like a headlamp at nighttime, maybe take it. You know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Just more nighttimey lately.
Yeah.
I like nighttime for like a million different reasons. The planet is a completely different place when it's dark,
Totally.
and I like that. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally a completely different vibe. I mean, when most people are asleep, and it's just like, probably, if you want to get into some dynamic of science or social science of it, the morphogenic fields are more different. Because you have different people consciously engaged. So just in the area, it feels different. Somewhere you
or
walk
even
by
just
all the time during the
less,
day.
maybe, you know, just
Hmm.
because there's less people because they're asleep.
All right.
You know,
Yeah, and they can cause
just
a
feels
space.
calmer,
Yeah.
slower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm not sure whether other people experience this, but in my experience of the energy being on the planet Earth, this place is like very chaotic. It's if you look at it like a waveform in the day, it's very much so like this. It's
Mm.
very pointy, has a lot of transience, and
Mm.
that transience has a tendency to happen really, really quick. I think kind of this ends up being really like the expression of attention deficit disorder, right? Like when I'm like
Mm.
here, and then I go here, and then I'm back here. Now I'm interested in something different. Like I'm
Mm.
interested, uninterested, reinterested. That would be one expression of this. And when those are very, very sharp things, it tends to lead to like a disjointed reality and oftentimes like disjointed conversation, really just overall disjointed psychological topography. And as a byproduct of
Mm.
that, people who are experiencing a operation like that have a tendency not to have as easy of a time remembering things, keeping things in order, keeping their focus on something, things like this. Because just, well, the way that feels normal to them is this process that it skips between things very quickly. It has other
Mm.
benefits to it, you know, like, well, people who are like the slow roller opposite of that, when they end up in a space that's like they don't feel good, they're probably going to be there for a really long time. Somebody who has
Mm.
ADD, sometimes they don't feel good and they feel fine. The next second they just pop into something else and stop paying attention to that. And that's really the only way that you actually like you have to be kind of engrossed in a situation in order to have your emotions affected by it.
Mm.
So even if you try to put it out of your mind, this is why like we you can't just tell somebody who's feeling bad about a situation, just stop thinking about it. They're like, well, I can't stop thinking about it. And there's some credence to that. Like, they
Mm.
can't, but that's also why they have the emotions, is because they're like completely engrossed in that thing, right?
Yeah.
And so they're basically attached to it. They've become a part of it. It's like a, it's not disjointed from me. It's a thing happening in my life. It's
Mm.
me, basically, you know. But it's like a thing happening in your life is not you. It's just a thing happening in your life. That's why we call it that, and
Yeah.
not you. You know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and there, I think, you can get into these like kind of mindsets where you are the all is you, these kinds of things, and you can start like to muddle this space up. And if you really went like hard on that, I think there's some benefits and some negatives actually to that, but hopefully through the process of doing that, you would gain perspective of both and then make a logical decision from the center point, as you always should. But
Mm.
nevertheless, like, when we need to realize that there are things that like we don't have to deal with. And everything that is an interaction, you're talking about connection. Every connection that you ever make is not a thing that you have to deal with. It's a thing that you get to deal with.
Mm.
Like, in the process of doing it, you are dealing with it. But if there was a disconnection between the two things, then you would not be dealing with it, but you would still exist. So you don't have to deal with any of those connections, but we choose to deal with those connections for one reason or another, and we kind of like make them into a part of ourselves. But that's like, well, I mean, that has the ability to do a lot of stuff, and some of it we don't actually want to do to ourselves because it's fucking scary, and we're trying to ignore that. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, uh, I mean, I've at least done that a lot in my life. I can't imagine I'm too different than other humans in that situation, where like you project yourself into basically a situation or a relationship. You maybe have problems or whatever in the relationship or the interaction, and if you take the time to really like analyze that real effectively, you kind of find like, well, you kind of have those problems everywhere you go, because everywhere you go, there you are, you
Yeah. No
know,
doubt.
and you're kind of the person with that problem, and maybe you didn't really want to see that about yourself. I think that's the hardest part of like, well, whatever you want to call it, like the search for knowledge of self or self-realization or enlightenment or whatever, is that like you're going to bring light to dark spots, and you need to accept them just as much as you would accept the light spots.
Mm.
Like, they just have to like, that's how it is,
Yeah.
you know. And it's okay that that's how it is. That doesn't make you a certain way. There's a huge lesson in the fact that that doesn't change, oh, okay, you have this really like this thing inside of you, we'll call it just a bad streak, right?
Mm.
That doesn't make you a bad person. That makes you a person that has this bad streak, and you also have all these other streaks, and really at the end of it, you're a combination of all of those. And there's a huge fucking lesson in that, because everybody has a little bit of bad in them to the right perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I guess in this case would kind of be the wrong perspective, right? Like, you
Yeah.
put it
Yeah.
in front of the wrong perspective. If everything that you do somebody thinks is bad, you should probably just move your object in front of someone else, because like, yikes, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. This phrase I came up with, I think, sometime last year or two, but I am not the things I know. What I know, or yeah, what I know helps me to articulate who I am.
Sure.
Something,
I
but like,
think like we should take that to a core level with language. Like,
mm,
that we're not the words we speak. The words we speak are a tool we use to try and demonstrate who we are.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and same thing with knowledge base, and then make it also beg the question, like, well, who am I if it's not also a conglomeration or an ongoing, ever changing conglomeration of my circumstances and thoughts and progression of thoughts and choices and whatever. But I guess at any
Sure.
given moment, whoever I am or whatever that means or have been is not just based on the knowledge acquired or the things one knows, but
Mm-hmm.
that how that is utilized to articulate the inner realities or the thoughts behind the decisions, besides
Yeah.
just the actions, external realities.
Yeah. I think that's definitely true, at least on the, if nothing else, on the level of like the whole is the sum of its parts.
Hmm.
Like, you end up becoming a conglomeration of the whole of your experience. And that again has like, well, that's got two ways of looking at it. You know what I mean? A lot of times people will have one experience, and then they very much so like lean into that one as being kind of their storyline. This can go good
Hmm.
ways and it can go bad ways. And I mean, it's really just like when I say good or bad, I mean like someone can lean into a story that they say is a negative experience, someone can lean into a story that they say is a positive experience. So, uh, but it's just so weird to me that we can just like paint this story about ourselves, or really not that we can't not paint the story. Like it's impossible, you
Mm,
know.
yeah.
And the effects of that, we are painting that story, that like we are what we ended up experiencing if we're looking at our who we are in hindsight, which I guess is actually more like who we were, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of time when we're looking at who we are, aren't we looking at who we were
Right.
actually? Like there's not really like we're not coagulating the foresight. We're only looking at the hindsight
Right.
and
Right.
maybe the present moment, and we say that's who we are when really that's who we were.
Yeah.
Right?
Or at least who we have been up to that moment of self-awareness and analyzation of the creation of that part of you, so then you can modify it and then do away with that part of you, if you
Yeah.
will, or change
Well,
it.
even like if you ask the question who we were, it's definitely all of that is in the past from the moment that you could possibly answer it, because that's
Yeah.
like the next moment. So like you're not actually even including the present ever unless you're also adjusting whatever answer you come up with. You're adjusting the definition of that functionally with it also knowing the answer to whatever it's trying to answer right now, which is actually a very difficult thing to do if you haven't tried to do it. Like, have you ever? So, funny things Zach has done on psychedelics. Have you ever tried to trick yourself with a riddle that you already know the answer to?
Mm.
It's impossible. It's impossible. So, like, if you're
Yeah.
searching for impossible things, that's an easy one to find. It's impossible to stump yourself with a riddle, to wit, the answer is something you already know. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I would never be able to trick myself with, like, so the answer is the thing everyone calls you. Well, everyone calls me my name. They call me Zach. That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
answer. I already know that. I'm never going to get stumped by that riddle, no matter how crafty I make the question, right? Like, if the question is actually isolated to basically what's your fucking name,
Mhm.
then I'm always going to know the answer. So, like, well, again, like, I'm all about looking at the both sides of things. That has pluses and minuses to it. Like, that means that there is the possibility, because I think this happens anyways, because but that means that it can't actually be happening. That means we have to make it happen. And it does seem to happen. And I've definitely done it to myself.
Mhm.
And again, I can't imagine I'm too different than other humans in this regard. You know? Like, I see this the most through like coaching other people. Because there'll be times when like we're talking about one of their problems. It's not about me at all. They have paid for my time, and I'm all about them for that time.
Mhm.
And we're talking about them, and like I say something to them, and I'm like immediately I'm like, you need to practice what you preach, dude.
Yeah.
Like that actually probably applies more to you than it does to the person that you're talking to right now. I mean, it's right for what you're saying to
Yeah. Yeah.
them, but also, why aren't you observing this? And
Mm.
that's what I'm talking about right there, like, because that will happen in situations where I feel like I've been looking for the answer, but then the answer comes forth through telling someone else what to do, and that
Yeah.
means
Yeah.
that the answer was, I'm not doing what I already know to do, and so I've stumped myself with a riddle that I actually already know the answer to.
Mm.
But I can only do it through purposeful design, which means I have to sabotage myself in order for it to happen. Which is like, so knowing that it can't actually happen is very, very beneficial to ensuring that you don't ever act like it's happening.
Mm.
Because it's not. You're doing it. Like, it's
Yeah.
not that's definitely not happening to you. There's no way that would just happen to you.
One of the most freeing things I've heard from a professor in college, she said, in one of the first classes, who was talking about that a synonym for human being is hypocrite. And it was like, it was just really freeing to hear. It's like, no, it's totally true. There's
Yeah.
always things that everyone knows they could do or should do and they don't do. And then there's things they know they shouldn't do, but they do. And, being able,
You
and we
said
give
doo doo.
advice. Yeah, do. And we give do advice to people,
Yeah.
even if we're not taking it ourselves, even though it's the right answer. Is it wrong to share that when you're not doing yourself? No, maybe the right answer is someone else. Just because you're aware that you are hypocritical doesn't take, I think people, when they think they I think maybe if people don't realize that's kind of an innate state of being a human being and of growth. Like you learn new tactics or things, but it's a while before implementing them. Just because you know them and you're not carrying them out, you can, that's be hypocritical in a sense, or I guess making progress or whatever. But if you
Yeah.
can't, you're allowing yourself to live in that state of dissonance, knowing that you'll move through it. That you don't have to always be in a place of absolute coherence, I guess, to what you say and think and do. Like those are always in flux, and there's like it's okay to be moving around in those spaces, I guess.
So it's like saying that like it's okay to be hypocritical.
Yeah, well, just to be as a generality, general truth. I think people think
Sure.
of that someone who like is intentionally lying or swindling people out for money or doing things that they know or whatever. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
they
we
put a lot of
malintend that.
malice inside of it
Yeah,
rather than a lot of ignorance. And when
yeah,
it's from like an ignorance space, like, well, you don't know what you don't know
yeah.
until you
Well,
know it,
just and
and then you
yeah,
probably change
ignorance
your
and
mind.
in con.
Did Oh, you got muted somehow. Okay, I was like, how did my audio possibly go off all of a sudden? What the fuck just happened? I thought my shit broke though, because you were like kicked back. Like I was like, he didn't. There's no way he touched anything. All right. Well, I don't know what Aaron did to his mic, so here we are though. Yeah. Uh, I don't know. I kind of was already like post rant. So Willow had a nap today. Cool. My nap
Okay.
was only like 30 minutes, so it wasn't a 3 hour banger or nothing, unfortunately.
Am I back? Can you hear me?
It's from a different mic though.
Like I said, I might foot accidentally hit the plug and unplug the mic setup, so should be able to fix that.
That's what happens when you're 608 feet tall. Your feet accidentally touch stuff. It's just too far away. You know what I mean? Like for the eye to foot length is just too great. You know, you can't possibly know everything that's going on down there. It's just too far away.
True.
So
Way too far away. All right, does that sound better?
that's the other mic now. Yep. Yep.
Cool. All right.
Yep.
What I was getting to too, and saying that there was a time when I remember sharing with someone they were processing with me this thing that it sounded like they'd really been thinking through and considering as being a way to help fix their life or get their life going in a direction that's positive. And they're talking about moving to another country and like they put a lot of thought in this, and this is something that came out over time and whatever. And after they're done with all of it, and in the moment, I wasn't trying to be like sarcastic or snarky or whatever. It just like made sense to me that this seemed to be a thing that they weren't being aware of, even though I feel like they would know this. But I said, yeah, but wherever you go, there you are.
Mm.
Like they're just structuring all this stuff that would seem to make things better or whatever. And it's like, but not in a way that like, sometimes it can't. Sometimes change of environment or different dynamics can be what you need to move through a situation or to progress or whatever. But it was clearly in a way that it was running from their problems and then
Yeah.
reminding them like, yeah, but you're still there. Like
Yeah.
whatever you set up, you're there. And man, they were really upset. That dynamic, I think, clicked with them. And they just didn't really. They were kind of in fantasy land, and it's like you bring them to a place that brings some reality, and they weren't ready for that, and then not so happy.
Yeah. I think these two things are like kind of intimately tied with one another in the sense that like we sometimes we basically ignore the power that we have in our own life when like well we really are actually like pretty powerful in our own life, and so we have to like well we don't have to, clearly we have ways of getting around it, that's what we're talking about, but
Yeah.
it benefits us to basically acknowledge that we have that power and then take responsibility for it, and then I think we can actually find that we can use it very effectively to generate exactly the change that we've been looking for anyways. Like in my experience like working with other people and definitely working with myself, like the actuation of whatever like the answer was to my problems was a lot easier once like the people that were supposed to do the job were in the right place. But
Mm.
most of the time I was the person that wasn't in the right place to like do the job, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like the quicker that I realized that in my life about any given situation, the faster I've been able to generate a positive effect on it. And really at the end of the day, I'm not like I'm firmly against spending time like bitching or complaining about something. I'm entirely about like it's fine to recognize a problem, but then immediately you go into problem like resolution mode, and there's a very like you do this and then you do this, and it's procedural because now that we've recognized the problem, we're going to do something about it.
Mm.
It's not about just like procedurally recognizing the problem in different ways. I don't think that is beneficial. So like I like to take responsibility, and I think it's what we're supposed to be doing anyways, personally. I think we try to not do it, and we don't have that choice. It goes bad.
Ability to respond. So instead of shirking things off as that's not my responsibility, it's like, well, do you have the ability to respond to that situation and change it? Because you do a lot more than you think, especially when it comes to you. That's respondability, I guess. Responsibility, similar.
Yeah, and I feel like if you have some kind of situation in your life, or you could even just say like your life isn't perfect, which like let's face it, like whose life is perfect, right? Like if your life isn't perfect, then you kind of want to do things about whatever's like not the perfection, right? Because you want it to be better. Like at least that's how it's always kind of I've thought about it. So this gives you that. Even if it wasn't your responsibility, like if you accept that responsibility, it gives you it anyways. It honestly to me like feels like you're just like cheating life. Like, instead of spending time looking for an answer, you can instead just be like, well, okay, so I'm the answer and this is how I do it, right? Yep. Like, and like that seems like free money to me. Why not do that? You know? I think I know why we don't do that. But maybe that's just why I have not done that at times in my life. Yeah, I've seen some consistency through other individuals as well.
Yeah.
Which is, oftentimes we think we want to fix a problem, but we actually kind of want to have the problem more than we want to fix the problem right now for one reason or another.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of my work with ayahuasca was about that exactly, like accepting through like accepting and embracing the problem, the solution becomes an actual possibility. Where it wasn't actually a possibility when it wasn't being accepted as something that was really there. And so a lot of it was, seeing parts of yourself that for one reason or another, you're kind of like not willing to accept about yourself, but coming to accept them, and then basically realizing the power that you have over them as a byproduct of that acceptance of those parts of yourself. But it's fucking hard, and it like sucks in certain places, but then like when you get beyond it, it becomes a very liberating thing. Like there was a point in time where if someone had said to me, Zach, you've been a really shitty father, I would be like, man, fuck you, dude. Like, who are you to say that to me? Like, you don't know my struggle. Now it legitimately feels very liberating for me to be on the internet and be like, guys, I've been a really shitty father. If there's anything that I could have done better at, one of the things definitely would have been that. I didn't have any fucking idea what I was doing. I did a bad job, and I've accepted that, like, I did a fucking bad job with that, like that is, it is what it is. Like, maybe I'll try again sometime, but the first try, it didn't go so hot, guys, and we need to learn from that, you know? And like, if it actually feels really like, it feels good to me then to say that, where it's something that I very much so like resisted and fought against before. Like, we would have like a legitimate fight if you said that shit about me, you know what I mean? And it was all, it's, looking at it now, I'm like, wow, it's like so ego driven, the whole thing. You know?
Well, anything that I guess anything we would take offense at, it's got to be ego driven. I mean, why else would we be offended or be reactive to anything?
Yeah, another thing from my work with ayahuasca, basically, I think we get offended because we're stupid. And I know that's pretty blunt, but I can only share things the way that they came to me, really. But that was pretty much how it came. Like, in the long run, it was really actually more along the lines of I thought ayahuasca was gonna be offended, and someone pointed out to me that like, do you really think that like this hyper intelligent thing that you're talking about there would be stupid enough to spend his time being offended by you? And I was like, oh, wait a minute, like, you're right. Actually, those are kind of linked to one another. No,
isn't that funny? Actually, like taking offense, I guess, could be equated with IQ too. I don't know any dynamic where it is beneficial I can think of. Maybe I just can't think of one, but like where it's beneficial to take on an offense.
Yeah. I really don't think it is. I mean, if you're trying to discern boundaries between one thing and another, then there are benefits to it. But if like the point of conversation, and it's like, I guess I would call it truest form. I don't know how right that statement is, but that's what I was gonna say. In its
Yeah.
truest form is to like, I then understand what you think, and you understand what I think. So we're trying to come together, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is basically a divisive mechanic, and its benefits lie in the realm of divisiveness, compartmentalization, separation, etc. So while it does have benefits to it, like those benefits aren't very beneficial if you're trying to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Sometimes having a conversation is not what you should do, though. You know what I
This
mean?
is true.
Like we gotta. I think it's come along with the participation trophy. We've gotten a lot into a culture where like let's talk about it has started to some people. I think it looks like it's some type of productive action, but oftentimes the talking about it is not a productive action at all. It's actually a way of prolonging any actual actions that generate results.
Mm.
And so in certain ways, like, I do believe that we need to talk about it to come to an understanding of like what's happening, but I also recognize that like there's a point where no, like, don't talk about it, be about it
Yeah. Yeah.
now. Yeah. I think you should be about it all the time, then maybe talk about it personally.
Yeah.
Really, like,
Or at least have
your
a
actions speak louder than your words anyways.
yeah, healthy mix of talking, processing things, but also acting on things and doing things.
Yeah. I come to find, at least in my life, that like a lot of your ideology is really like best expressed through just being it, rather than like
Mm.
trying to explain it to someone. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yep.
And
That's the
so
same
in that
thing.
case,
And
it's like much better just to be about it.
like to know someone's character, if they're a good person, or it's not so much what they do or what they put online or whatever. It's being able to follow them around for the week, and ideally being able to be inside their head. Like
Yeah.
just being able to follow them around, man, to see how they operate, how they, choices they make on a daily basis or seemingly inconsequential things, and even the way they process those choices or not. How
Sure.
mindful or mindless they are in their behaviors or actions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
When we think about how difficult it seems to obtain knowledge of our own selves, the prospect of getting to know someone else's character becomes kind of a daunting request, don't you think? Like,
Yeah,
how the fuck are you
yeah,
gonna get to know someone that can't even really actually figure themselves out? You know what I
right,
mean? Like, it's an impossible task.
yeah.
You just like try your best and know you're gonna fail, and that's fine. You know?
Well, I guess a lot of it by happenstance. So if you happen to find yourself in a long-term or live-in relationship, I mean, just by default, you have opportunity all the time, whether you're consciously seeking out or not, to get to know someone, analyze their behaviors, or just be aware of them and to try to figure them out. Because
Yeah,
there's
it can
always
become literally a problem that you are actually doing that like all the time. There's
right.
that you can't not do that. You know what I?
It's one thing to try to figure someone else out. It's another thing to try to like impose on someone else, I guess, and that becomes the play or interplay of living with other people. But just the dynamic
Absolutely.
of being able to be aware, or be around other people, and the freedom. Well, I guess whatever interactions you have, but like, I guess cognitively, I find myself having to be aware of like if I find things or people interesting that I want to like ask questions, but I want to study them or that thing about them. But
Sure.
then they're also a person, so to just treat them like some kind of science project, because some level it is like there's something, some dynamic about you or about this thing that's fascinating and really interesting to me, and so I can engage in a hyper engaged way that could almost seem, depending on how their person's persona or personality
Isn't
and
that
just
maybe
dynamic.
just like your love language though? Like that's the way that you operate when you're genuinely intrigued in someone else, is functionally you study them. You know?
Yeah, interesting.
Would you
How'd
consider
you?
yourself sapiosexual?
Yeah, for sure.
Then I think that that would like be completely standard, right? Like you want to be intellectually intrigued by the person that is like the object of your desire, you know?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
so with that, the expression of that is going to then of course be that I am intellectually intrigued, which well kind of looks like treating them like a science experiment if you're going to put it
mm,
like that,
yeah, yeah.
you know? I don't think that it has to be put like that. You could also put it as like you show a genuine interest in learning about who they are and what makes them tick, which in
Yeah, but
to
still, like,
some
Oh, here's the difference, or the nuances that I feel like get parsed in there, at least with emotions or relationships or just human interaction is a relationship, and there's emotions and whatever with people. Um, the science project, if you will, like the whole interaction is now this who knows how long you interact with people. So the interaction has become its own project that has an unknown end date. While
Mm-hmm.
it's ongoing, these conversations can be more and more effective or beneficial for whatever it is I'm desiring to know out of whatever data I'm mining out of this project from the interaction with the other person. But then it's like, so there's the whole way of like looking at it. It's very, I don't know. I guess in that mindset scientific. Then, but there's also the awareness of like, but this is also a person. So even though there's a scientific interaction or
So you
inquisitiveness
feel
back
that
and
like
forth,
treating
or
them as an experiment dehumanizes them.
it has a potential to. I think it's a framework that has the potential to more easily dehumanize or to separate your own, interactions. And so I think it's just like adding that extra layer of awareness that there's or the desire, I guess, in myself too, depending on the context, to want to enjoy the person also, which is a slightly different nuance than enjoying the intrigue and getting to know this thing about a person.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Huh. I don't really see it as dehumanizing at all, me personally, but that's probably because I kind of look at human life as a whole as basically this thing taking place in a petri dish. I
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
think we are the human experiment on a certain level. I
yeah.
think there's a certain possibility. I think if you believe in any type of like one mind consciousness, big mind, Buddhic mind, God, any of these things, you're
Hmm.
technically agreeing to a system where like you're a projection of a thing to be experienced, which basically means to
Hmm.
be experimented on. And so you are like the experiment of its self actualization in a certain way. And
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with that, at least in my looking at it.
Yeah, yeah.
I understand why some people are like, do I understand that? I don't know that I actually understand why some people feel that like if you science something, you've taken all the life out of it.
Yeah, and that's why I think, like I said, I think it creates a context where that's more easy to do, where as opposed to a context of getting to know or interact with people is based on also being aware of and caring about their well-being. Whereas when it's in a dynamic of this person who is also a person has now come into my life and I'm very intrigued by them, and so I engage them, not really caring about their well-being. As long as they're willing to engage with me, I'm going to mine data from them, whatever that means to you. And so it just leaves an opportunity for it to be
I mean, when
more
you word it with mining
emotionless.
data, but like if I word that exact same function as I appreciate having this person in my life, so in the time that they are in my life, I'm going to take every opportunity that I'm presented to learn as much as I can about them because I think they're a really fantastic collection of things.
Okay, so totally. So even the way you described it is it adds nuances of callousness or humanity to the same actions though. We're just describing a way of interacting that just could be, it's more of like a, does that make sense?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's all like your perception of
Yeah.
experimentation
Yeah,
at,
yeah.
at the end of the day. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I definitely have been the person that errs on the side of making something like more scientific for
Mhm.
sure in my life. And I've definitely experienced stuff, especially in my interaction with women, where to their perspective, that was like, well, it wasn't kind of like honoring the illogical space is the way that I would understand it now. And I have to say the way that I understand it because I really actually do have like, I see what they were saying now, and they were right, you know, in a lot
Mhm.
of ways, despite the fact that like I argued against it vehemently for the longest time, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm like hypocritical when I say that, and this is why
Sure.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I didn't really understand what the value was of that there yet,
Yeah.
and because of the nature of the thing, I understand now also why one could know the value of that thing, but not be able to really tell anybody what that value is, you
Mm.
know,
Yeah,
like it's
yeah.
just a value, it they just know it, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And yeah, to science brain, Zach, that was not a thing. Like if you can't logic it out and say exactly what it is with an equation, you don't know it. You
Yeah.
think you know, but you don't know it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So I do understand that side some now, but I don't think any one of these like, I mean, from the hard science perspective, one could say that not like allowing the experimentation is to also like take the life out of it, because the experimentation is really the like the deepest level of engagement with what it is for that thing to be alive. Like you're gonna study it
Yeah,
on every level. So
totally.
like both of them could make the argument for like, no, my side's the good side. And like the good side is actually in a situation like that becomes actually an interactive dynamic. So no one person can actually define that.
Mm.
In the person that you are interacting with, do they see it the same way that you do? Because if they do, then that's probably going to go pretty well.
Mm.
But if they don't, it's probably going to have this fucking problem inside of everything that ever happens, you know?
Yeah.
And so,
And you want coherence inside of your science projects.
yeah, well,
Usually
I
makes
mean,
them
like
progress.
we don't have a we don't have a problem with people running experiments. However, experimenting on live animals, you know what I mean? And what's
Yeah.
really actually the difference? The difference is that we perceive that for instance, let's say the monkey would not want to be experimented on, so that we're like pushing it against its free will. That's probably accurate. Like, if you've seen any of those experiments, you probably wouldn't want that done to you. So I
Hmm.
don't know why anything else would, right? So that's probably accurate. But really, like, what we have a problem with is that the thing doesn't want it done to it. Not so much that we're doing it, right? It's that
Yeah.
we're doing it and, you
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? So,
So,
like,
so a consensual experimentation.
yeah, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
if you're okay with being the lab rat, then everything's totally fine. You know what I
It's
mean?
interesting in like a human context. So, like finding people interesting or fascinating, and so even being able to answer that, there's a level of like it's kind of fun to be like someone's that interested in something about you that you know you're the lab rat or their experiment, not just about whatever, just about your thoughts or something about you. There's also a level of well, that's kind of cool. Someone in the world actually finds something about me super intriguing. All right,
Yeah.
nice.
I've definitely been able to see a lot of positives from it, from being on like the side where like I didn't feel like I was getting it, but
Mm,
what I didn't feel like I was getting was like a reciprocation of something that I was giving. So
mm,
I can, through that kind of like interaction, see that, well, this is a part that somebody could perceive as valuable. And like I feel like when you're engaged with somebody that perceives it like that experimentation, it's actually like, well, you get to talk about whatever the fuck you want to talk about all the time. It can always be about you and whatever you're finding interesting in that moment, like all the time.
yeah,
And they're totally engaged in like asking you questions about that, and they want to know more. And sometimes they're even asking questions that you can't answer yet, and it causes you to dig deeper on the thing that you're interested in. And it's actually now it's like somebody's doing it with you, even though they're really just doing it because you.
yeah.
And like this can be a great dynamic that plays off there. But if you know so I see a lot of positive potentials
Yeah,
with
totally.
that.
Yeah.
I also see the possibility that somebody could be like, why is it always got to be about me? Like, why don't you ever talk about what you fucking like? And I want to learn about you, and I don't know anything about you because we're always fucking focused on whatever the fuck I be doing.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I want to be doing those things by myself. I don't want you all focused on that shit.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
I don't want to fucking figure out my fantasy football team with you. I want to figure out my fantasy football team with my bros, and
Yeah.
not you around at all. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
please don't be interested in my fantasy football team. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, totally. And knowing, like, I mean, I guess in relation to that dynamic too, the boundaries of like where inquisitiveness or interest is, well, consensual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all like this is why I think the whole like orientation of many people's, we'll call them conversations, but they're usually just petty debates or arguments about like their problems in their relationship, is going through this like I'm right, you're wrong type of mentality. Like, that's just not how a relationship functions. Like, no one person is ever right about anything that's going on in the relationship, because the relationship is an interactive dynamic created through two parts.
Mhm.
So it's never like just what one person wants from it. That's
Yeah.
literally never the case. So you being right is really only a justification right out of the relationship, realistically.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense. But that's people's default mode of operation in that. I think that's because they're scared. and that's just then they just act the only way they know to act.
Hmm.
So but it's not helping you to do that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Communication is a funny thing, and I think that you started the show out talking about connection, and it's interesting that like the more that we do gain connection, the more that we see more and more of what does communication really look like, what can it be good like, you know, where can it fail, like how does it fail, all of these things. And it's just so weird, you know, because
Yep.
did we ever actually need to get any of this communicated anyways, is the part that really gets me, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it's very, very possible that we're really only trying to like get this story across because we are, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then we have all these quote unquote problems with communication, but you know, every problem stems out of some type of basically compartmentalization into things have to be like this. And so if they're not, it's a problem. You know what
Mm.
I mean?
Yeah.
And what if that's not true? What if things don't have to be like anything? They just a lot of the times are like something, but other times they're not, you know? And
Mm.
it's just fine like that, and that's just how it is. And cuz that seems more accurate, you know, like I started recently making coffee and putting cookie instead of using any sugar, I put cookies and cream ice cream in it. It's fucking
Cool.
amazing.
It
Like it's
sounds awesome.
amazing, right? But
Yeah.
I can totally understand where someone would be like, "Ew, gross. I like my coffee black."
Mm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And what that says is that like where I could sit here and go like, "It is literally the best way to drink coffee. You have to do it." Somebody could be like, "No, it's actually just ruins the coffee."
Yeah.
And we're both right because it's just fucking perspective bullshit, man. And so
Yeah.
it's really more about like aligning your perspective with other things if you're really trying to communicate.
Mm.
And that means that you have to like honor what they want and you have to honor what you want. So it's never I'm right, you're wrong, or it's your fault, it's not my fault. Like, this is not real life. You know?
Yeah.
We got to get out of that shit. Like, I think that's my opinion, is that we need to get out of that shit. I think it's just hurting us and our ability to kind of like, well, grow into the world that I think most of us would like to see. And a lot of us maybe don't think it's possible to obtain. But
Mm.
if it is possible to obtain, it's going to require some parts in order for that whole to be summated, right?
Mm.
And I think one of those parts is that we realize that like the primary thing in communication is not to like get your point across in terms of your operation. It's more about receiving the other thing's point. And if both sides are focused on receiving the other thing's point, then communication is much, much easier. It flows much smoother because it's really like if I talked about this literally just before the show. That like there's a reason why Nike's slogan is just do it and not some big long like paragraph long elaboration on exactly what they're trying to say
Mm.
about that. But where this can take another look at it is that like sometimes you only need 3 simple words in order to actually get your point across to the right person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so communication, when it's really popping off, like being done right, it's the right person saying the right things to the right person about the right thing. You see that like so much can get communicated in so little. And
Yeah.
that should like raise question as to like how much effort should we really put into trying to get our point across. Perhaps we should say it very simply, and if they don't fucking get it, then they weren't supposed to. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that's just fine. And maybe we put an awful lot of effort into like stopping that from happening when it's like
So that'd be like
it's fine.
anger. It'd be allowing ourselves to be drawn more towards the conversations or the interactions that are fluid and more effortless, on the side of effortless in exchange, as opposed to the ones where it's a struggle to always communicate
Yeah,
or
exactly.
to hear it be heard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can do this in our business and our personal relationships, you
Mhm.
know, big time. That like there's certain places inside of your business or your relationship where it pays off to put in work. And there are other places where you are actually hurting yourself by putting in work.
Yeah.
It's
No
better
doubt.
to not put in work in that place and rather just like let reality kind of weed itself out, you know?
Yeah.
Things that aren't for you have a tendency to go away if you don't force them to stay. So it can be very
Mhm.
beneficial to not force things to stay, you know, kind of abstract and vague about this because in every single situation it's very specific to the situation,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not always the same thing. So you can't really speak about it directly, but it's
That's a
something.
great way to say it though, that, sometimes the things will just have a habit of naturally going away if you don't stop forcing them to stay. That's a great
Yeah.
way for people to frame that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, karmic cycle is exactly this. Like, karmic cycle doesn't really just like always happen to you. Otherwise, there would be absolutely no hope of ever breaking a karmic cycle. And, like,
Right.
you know, if you feel like that's impossible, hate to break it to you, people have broken karmic cycles in a single life,
Mhm.
right? Like, where maybe it was even isolated to that life. So it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
And if that's possible, like it's possible because you're the one that's like doing it, not because you're actually forced into having it
Yeah.
happen,
Totally.
you know? And you keep playing it out by making the same kinds of decisions from the same basis and with the same mindset. And, you know, sometimes the easiest way to solve that is to just like not make a decision in that space. Do nothing. This Zen and the Art of Doing Nothing is a great book, but
Mm.
a better concept, because in a lot of places in your life, the most effective thing that you can do is nothing at all. Like literally do nothing to affect that situation. Just let it sit there and see how it plays out. And really, like, the art of doing nothing is realizing like when you can do nothing and when you must do something, you know?
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you need to understand the nuances of doing nothing and not
Yeah,
just
no
look at
doubt.
doing nothing as not doing anything at all, because
Yeah.
oftentimes it's actually doing something, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, in the
And
Greek, like the Greek word for patience, I don't remember what it was now, but like the word picture image of it is like, in the context is like a soldier moving through a battlefield to get to the other side. But he's fighting, he's parrying, he's defending, he's whatever. He's being patient, but very similar to perseverance.
sure.
That's actual
Yeah,
patience. So it's like it's an actual verb. It's an active word, patience.
right. Yeah. I really think it is, and like you can draw some weird etymological crossovers with this if you start playing with the words and like the concept of what is Shen, and inside
Hmm.
of that, that's a word that's close to spirituality in certain doctrines, and that would be like Taoist alchemy with
Hmm.
the upper energy, the coagulation of the upper three chakras, the crown, the third eye, and the throat, come together into the upper dantian, and energy stored or transmuted into the upper dantian is called Shen energy.
Hmm.
And it's really like, well, Shen energy is extremely powerful and only comes through like the reservation of otherwise utilizing that energy to like do something here. You build it into a space where it can have an even grander effect, basically, and this is how you come about it. But nevertheless, the idea of that, and then the idea that pei shens, right, is like the idea
Huh.
that like I'm giving this energy away to something, and the function of actually how to coagulate shen energy is very much so to like give away your action in the situation with the goal to be to coagulate something greater than what
Hmm.
could be affected right now. Like you take it slowly, right? Or you wait, like you do nothing about it right now and you just wait.
Hmm.
And that is, in certain ways, you could look at this two different ways, that it's a good way to coagulate that energy. But then also, when you're doing this to something, you are really like focusing that kind of energy on it. And are those the kinds of things that you should be focusing that onto? Energy put into to be zen about it.
Hmm.
Uh, Water flowing into a river that is dammed never left the lake, because a river always flows.
Hmm.
So if you invest your resources into something that appears to be something that you want, but in actuality does not do the thing that you are actually trying to do, you could invest all of your resources into something that can functionally never grant you a return. So you should be very cognizant about what you're putting your resources into, most specifically the highest formats of your energy, which are like your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
That's what Shen energy would, the easiest way to say it would be your thoughts, with like the next one down being your actions, and the one below that being functionally your motivation. You know,
Hmm.
if you drive your motivation towards something that you actually want and something that is actually possible, and you put out the actions that make that thing possible, and you keep your mind focused towards it to then cycle that loop back around, inevitably that wheel will take you to whatever fucking place you want to go. But you have to keep making the wheel turn through
Yeah.
this process. And that is the circulation of energy through the concept of Taoist alchemy. And this is deep inside of a lot of martial arts as well, mainly through like transmuting all of this energy back into ki, which is by like focusing your thoughts in a specific place and focusing your actions in a specific place, and then making sure that you're taking that from a grounded place. And so,
Awesome. And on that
on
note,
that note,
yeah,
be
good
aware what
timing.
you pay your shens out to. You know, the stuff that you consume with your mind and what you focus your attention on is very much so something that actualizes itself in your life in many different ways. So I encourage you to focus on good foods and good activities and good sources of information. And all of these can be found by asking your heart whether or not that thing is good or not. If it makes you feel good, it can't actually be that bad because it already has been given a contextual answer that is limited unto yourself. But that's the only one that really actually matters. So just ask yourself whether that's a good thing for you to do. And ask yourself that. Take the time for yourself to ask yourself whether that's a good thing for you to do for yourself. And if you do that and listen to what you tell yourself, you will probably find yourself in a lot better place quite quickly. So thanks for
Agreed.
being here. Like, subscribe, bell notification, social media channels below in the description, and other stuff that we do. Feel free to take part or don't. Do whatever feels good to you. We'll be here regardless. Have a good night.
Night.